The loudest applause often comes long after the kindest hearts have already been broken. Sometimes, the person everyone pushes aside is the very one who stands between life and death. This is the unforgettable story of a nurse who lost her career in a single afternoon, only to become the reason 57 strangers lived to see another sunrise. By the time the hospital director discovered the truth, it was already too late to erase the damage he had caused, and the entire nation would soon learn that true heroes never wear titles, they simply refuse to stop caring. Before we begin, if you believe kindness should never be mistaken for weakness and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire hope and remind us that compassion can change lives. In the busy city of Columbus, Ohio, stood St. Andrew Medical Center, one of the most respected hospitals in the state. Every hallway echoed with hurried footsteps, rolling stretchers, ringing monitors, and exhausted healthcare workers trying their best to keep up with impossible demands. Among hundreds of employees worked a 34-year-old nurse named Sarah Collins. She was never the loudest person in the room. She never sought recognition, awards, or praise. Patients remembered her because she stayed after her shift to comfort frightened families. Children trusted her because she always carried colorful stickers in her pocket. Elderly patients smiled whenever she entered because she somehow remembered every birthday, every favorite song, and every little story they had shared weeks earlier. Many doctors quietly admitted that Sarah noticed things others missed. Tiny changes in breathing, unusual skin color, silent signs of infection, or the faintest irregular heartbeat rarely escaped her attention. Experience had sharpened her instincts, but kindness had shaped her character. She believed every patient deserved to feel seen, not just treated. Unfortunately, not everyone admired her. The hospital's new executive director, Michael Harper, believed hospitals should operate like corporations. He valued efficiency, numbers, budgets, and reputation above everything else. To him, compassion could never interfere with policy. Within weeks of arriving, he introduced stricter rules, shorter patient interaction times, and harsh disciplinary measures for anyone who questioned administrative decisions. Sarah often found herself gently disagreeing with policies that she believed endangered patient care. She never argued loudly. She simply asked thoughtful questions during meetings, suggesting that patients needed more attention than spreadsheets could measure. Her co-workers appreciated her courage, but they also worried she was becoming a target. Their fears proved correct. One rainy Thursday evening, the emergency department admitted an elderly homeless veteran named Thomas Reed. He had collapsed outside a grocery store after several days without food or medication. His clothing was worn, his beard untrimmed, and his belongings fit inside a single torn backpack. Some staff members barely looked at him before moving on to other patients. Sarah treated him like family. She carefully cleaned his wounds, arranged warm blankets, found clean clothes donated by volunteers, and even used her own money to buy him a proper meal from the hospital cafeteria after learning he had not eaten in nearly 3 days. Hospital security later reported the purchase because employees were discouraged from forming personal attachments with patients. Director Michael Harper called Sarah into his office the next morning. Instead of thanking her humanity, he accused her of violating hospital policy, creating liability concerns, and encouraging dependency. Several administrators sat silently around the conference table while Sarah calmly explained that she simply couldn't ignore a hungry veteran who needed help. Michael interpreted compassion as insubordination. By the end of the meeting, Sarah was suspended indefinitely pending an internal investigation. The news spread through the hospital like wildfire. Doctors were shocked. Nurses cried in the break room. Patients asked where their favorite nurse had gone. Yet the administration remained silent. Sarah packed her locker without complaint. She hugged several co-workers, thanked them for their friendship, and quietly walked out of the hospital carrying a small cardboard box filled with family photographs, notebooks, and the stethoscope her late father had given her when she graduated nursing school. For the first time in 12 years, she had nowhere to report for work. The following weeks became the hardest season of Sarah's life. Bills accumulated. Her savings slowly disappeared. Job applications produced few responses because every potential employer noticed the unresolved suspension on her employment record. Still, she refused bitterness. Instead of sitting at home, Sarah volunteered 3 days each week at a free community health clinic serving uninsured families. The clinic operated inside a small church basement on the east side of Columbus. Resources were limited, but hope remained abundant. Elderly volunteers prepared meals while retired physicians donated their time. Sarah treated every patient with the same dedication she had always shown. She reminded herself that purpose never depends on a paycheck. Then came the day no one could have imagined. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when a crowded interstate bridge outside Columbus became the scene of one of the state's worst transportation disasters in decades. A charter bus carrying students returning from a regional science competition collided with a fuel truck during heavy construction traffic. Several nearby vehicles crashed into the wreckage moments later. Within minutes, smoke filled the air. People screamed for help. Emergency dispatch centers became overwhelmed. Dozens of ambulances raced toward the scene while every nearby hospital activated disaster protocols. St. Andrew Medical Center suddenly faced the greatest emergency in its history. 57 critically injured victims were transported there within less than an hour. Doctors rushed between operating rooms. Hallways overflowed with stretchers. Blood supplies dwindled. Communication systems struggled under overwhelming pressure. Fear spread faster than the incoming patients. By extraordinary coincidence, Sarah had been volunteering only 5 miles away when local emergency radio channels reported the mass-casualty incident. Without hesitation, she drove toward St. Andrew Medical Center. She knew she had been suspended. She knew security might refuse her entry. She knew she had every reason to stay away. Yet she also knew people were fighting for their lives. Nothing else mattered. Arriving at the overwhelmed emergency entrance, Sarah found complete chaos. Families searched desperately for loved ones. Nurses sprinted between trauma bays. Volunteers struggled to organize incoming medical supplies. One exhausted physician recognized her immediately. Without asking questions or checking paperwork, he handed Sarah protective equipment and pointed toward the pediatric emergency section. There was no time for bureaucracy. Children needed help. For the next several hours, Sarah worked with relentless determination. She organized treatment priorities, calmed terrified parents, assisted surgeons, started intravenous lines, stabilized fractures, monitored critical patients, comforted frightened teenagers, and coordinated volunteer nurses who had arrived from neighboring clinics. Her calm voice became an anchor amid panic. Whenever someone felt overwhelmed, Sarah somehow appeared beside them with quiet encouragement. Whenever confusion threatened patient safety, she restored order. Whenever despair began creeping into exhausted staff members, she reminded them why they became healthcare workers in the first place. Outside, helicopters continued landing. Inside, hope refused to surrender. Late that evening, another crisis erupted. A temporary oxygen distribution problem threatened multiple trauma rooms simultaneously. Several inexperienced volunteers panicked. Sarah immediately improvised an emergency patient redistribution plan, ensuring every critically injured victim continued receiving life-saving respiratory support until engineers restored the main system. Doctors later admitted that her quick thinking likely prevented numerous fatalities. Nearly 14 exhausting hours after the first victims arrived, the final patient had finally been stabilized. 57 people survived. Against every prediction, not a single transported victim had died inside St. Andrew Medical Center. News reporters praised the hospital's extraordinary response. Television cameras gathered outside the entrance. Politicians congratulated administrators. Director Michael Harper proudly prepared for interviews celebrating the hospital's success. During the official emergency debriefing, he stood before exhausted doctors and nurses wearing an expression of satisfaction. He thanked every department before asking the question that would forever change his career. He wanted one name. He wanted to know who had coordinated the impossible. The room fell completely silent. Every eye slowly turned toward the back. Finally, Chief Surgeon Jonathan Brooks quietly answered. The nurse who saved all 57 victims was the nurse you suspended. Silence became heavier than any words. Michael's confident expression disappeared instantly. Several staff members lowered their heads. Others openly wiped tears from their eyes. The director looked around the room, hoping someone would contradict the statement. Nobody did. Instead, physician after physician described Sarah's leadership. Emergency technicians explained how she organized triage before administrators even arrived. Surgeons admitted they relied on her judgment throughout the night. Junior nurses confessed they avoided panic because Sarah never stopped encouraging them. One respiratory therapist quietly stated that without Sarah's emergency oxygen management plan, several patients might not have survived. The truth was undeniable. The woman considered unworthy of wearing the hospital uniform had become the heartbeat of the entire emergency response. Michael sat speechless. For the first time since becoming director, numbers, policies, and corporate language offered no protection from reality. He had suspended the very person who represented everything a hospital was meant to be. The following morning, national news outlets interviewed grateful families. One father described how Sarah stayed beside his injured daughter until surgery. An elderly grandmother remembered Sarah holding her hand throughout terrifying medical procedures. A teenage survivor recalled that Sarah repeatedly reminded frightened students they were not alone. None of them cared whether she had been suspended. To them, she had simply been their angel. Public pressure mounted quickly. Community members organized petitions demanding Sarah's reinstatement. Veterans organizations remembered Thomas Reed, the homeless veteran she had helped weeks earlier. When reporters located Thomas, he stood before television cameras wearing clean clothes and holding back tears. He revealed that Sarah's kindness had convinced him life was still worth fighting for. After leaving the hospital, he had entered a veterans assistance program, found temporary housing, and begun rebuilding his life. His emotional interview spread across the country. Millions watched. Millions cried. The hospital board launched an independent investigation into Sarah's suspension. Their findings were devastating. She had violated no ethical standards. She had endangered no patients. Her only offense had been choosing compassion where policy demanded distance. Within days, Director Michael Harper resigned. His departure made headlines, but Sarah showed no satisfaction. She never celebrated another person's downfall. Instead, she quietly returned to work after the board unanimously invited her back, not simply as a staff nurse, but as Director of Clinical Patient Care, a newly created position focused on improving compassion throughout the hospital. She accepted only after requesting one condition. No employee would ever again be punished for showing reasonable kindness to patients. The board agreed immediately. Over the following years, St. Andrew Medical Center transformed completely. Patient satisfaction reached record highs. Employee morale improved dramatically. Medical schools invited Sarah to speak about compassionate leadership. Hospitals across America adopted training programs inspired by her approach. Yet despite every award, every newspaper article, and every standing ovation, Sarah remained exactly the same. She still carried colorful stickers for children. She still remembered birthdays. She still sat beside lonely patients long after her shift officially ended. Because true greatness never changes with recognition. It simply continues serving. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment to help more people discover stories that restore hope and remind us that compassion can truly change the world. Special request, before you go, please comment, kindness always finds its way back. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Some heroes are introduced with medals. Some are announced with titles. But the greatest heroes often walk quietly through crowded hallways, unnoticed by the world, carrying nothing more than a tired smile and a heart that refuses to give up on another human being. Sarah Collins never set out to become famous. She never fought for recognition or applause. She simply believed that every life mattered, whether it belonged to a wealthy businessman, a frightened child, or a homeless veteran with nowhere to go. In the end, history did not remember the executive who suspended her. It remembered the nurse who chose compassion when it was hardest, stood firm when she was treated unfairly, and proved that one caring heart can save far more than lives. It can restore faith in humanity itself.